Survival horror. It's a genre that's always stood the test of time. Throughout the different generations, it's always had a handful of games which have stood out throughout the years. Whether that be the creepy, demented world of Silent Hill in the PS1 and PS2 era, and games like Dead Space and Fear being more action orientated, but still downright terrifying during the PS3 and 360 era. But throughout the last 4 decades, there's been one series that has had the biggest impact on the genre, that of course being It's a series that's seen a lot of ups, but also a lot of downs. And in the mid-2010s, the series was in a bad place. That was until 2017, when one game changed everything. So, with the release of Resident Evil Requiem right around the corner, I wanted to take a look back at Resident Evil 7, the game that saved the series. Before we get to Resident Evil 7 though, I think it's important to take a look back at the series' history. All the way back in 1996, the original Resident Evil would release on the PS1, and even though it wasn't the original survival horror, taking inspiration from games like Alone in the Dark and Capcom's 1989 Japanese exclusive for the NES, Sweet Home, the game would be remembered for bringing the genre to the mainstream, with the first game selling just over 5 million copies. The reason for its huge success was down to its eerie atmosphere and terrifying, at the time, jump scares. Its gameplay also helped too. Looking past the tank controls, the game had pretty interesting puzzle solving and exploration, set in the creepy Spencer Mansion. Throughout the PS1 generation, Resident Evil would cement itself as one of the biggest franchises on that console, with 2 more releases on that platform, with the sequel being remembered just as fondly as the original. And whilst the third game wouldn't be as beloved as the other 2, it still sold pretty well, and was enough to keep the series on track to have the same impact on the next generation of consoles. Heading into the 2000s though, the series now had a serious competitor, this being Silent Hill, from Capcom's rival publisher, Konami. And even though the original Silent Hill would do okay, it was its sequels on the PlayStation 2 that would really see that franchise hit its stride. During this time, the Resident Evil series saw a few spin-offs that did quite well, but fans were still waiting for the next numbered entry in the series, and in 2005 we would get the game that changed everything. Resident Evil 4 is seen as one of the best games in the franchise, and it's not hard to see why. The game got rid of the old dated tank controls, instead having a more action orientated experience, while also keeping the eerie atmosphere, puzzle solving and item scavenging the series was known for. And with its unique setting and great level design, it's no surprise this was one of the most successful games in the franchise. As for their rival series Silent Hill, even though their 4th game was okay, it just couldn't compete with Resi anymore. Konami's series would go through its own awkward phase through the late 2000s, having a good few games but failing to adapt to the 7th generation of consoles. It seemed like the Resident Evil series, however, was still going strong into this generation. With the release of Resident Evil 5 in 2009, the 5th game in the series is definitely like Marmite. Some people love it and others hate it. I for one really like it, but I understand why others don't. It did a lot of the same things the 4th game did, but also may have steered too heavy towards the action side of things, but it was just a sign of the times. The survival horror genre as a whole was going through a transitional period, where you were no longer trying to survive with a bare minimum of supplies. You now had all the ammo and armour you could possibly need, and the games relied more on jump scares and more intimidating enemies to keep the horror element alive. Heading into the 2010s, this more action orientated version of the franchise would carry on with the release of the infamous Resident Evil 6, known for 2 things: being one of the most disliked games in the series, and also the logo resembling a giraffe having a good time, which I'm not going to explain any further, just look it up. The game just focused way too much on big action set pieces and didn't really feel like a traditional Resident Evil game. Around this time we also saw the release of Operation Racoon City, which was more of the same action orientated experience, even more so than 6. The only game in the franchise at this time that even resembled the classic Resident Evil feel was released exclusively on the 3DS, that being Revelations. And don't get me wrong, I love the 3DS, but the best game in the series shouldn't be a 3DS exclusive really, should it? At this time, survival horror was having another transition, this being the rise in popularity of the first person horror game that were being played by YouTubers and streamers at the time, like PewDiePie and Markiplier. With games like Amnesia, Outlast and Slender, this subgenre became so popular that it wouldn't be too long until one of the big names in the genre had a go at making a comeback. I'm not talking about Resident Evil. PT released in 2014, which was a demo for the upcoming reboot of Silent Hill, directed by none other than MGS legend Hideo Kojima. This short glimpse into what a horror game made by Kojima would look like was enough to convince people that we were about to see the scariest game ever to be released. To this day, I don't think there has been anything that's even come close to matching the atmosphere and downright creepiness of this demo. Sadly, Konami and Kojima had a falling out after the release of MGS5, which meant that Silent Hills was cancelled and PT was taken off the PlayStation Store, which means there's no legal way to play this anymore, and it has been lost ever since. With the absence of Silent Hill's triumphant comeback, the team over at Capcom decided to capitalise on the community's desire to see an old legend return to its roots in a completely new way. The seed was planted in 2015 when the team showed off a PSVR tech demo called Kitchen. This was more like an interactive video, if anything, but it gave us a first glimpse of the world and characters we would be seeing in the next game, but they kept the words Resident Evil out of the demo. Similar to PT, they wanted to surprise people with a big reveal, which would happen just a year later at E3 2016. The best thing about this reveal is that literally no one knew that the game we were seeing was Resident Evil 7 until the very end of the trailer. So, how did people react? Well...
No, never.
7 silent...
Every survival horror fan was hyped for this new spin on a legendary franchise that needed reviving more than ever. The game would release in little over 6 months after the reveal, but in those 6 months the devs released a demo called Beginning Hour. The unique thing about this demo was that it was updated every so often with new clues and locations on the map to explore, giving fans more and more of a glimpse of what's to come with a full release. This was such a great idea, and it's a shame we don't really get things like this anymore, as this would be a great way to tease a new release. One more thing I need to touch on is the logo design. After being claimed for its RE6 logo, I think the designers had a point to prove. The RE7 logo has the Roman numerals for 7 hidden in the word evil, but that's not all. The full title name of the game is Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Biohazard being the name of the series in Japan. So in Japan the game is called Biohazard 7 Resident Evil, with the number 7 hidden in the letter Z. Whoever designed this logo genuinely is an absolute genius, and I just needed to mention it because it's one of the coolest design choices I've ever seen. The game would finally release in January of 2017 with the tagline Fear Comes Home. So, how was he? Well, let's take a look. I want to start off by talking about the story, as RE7 did something quite interesting. You see, because of the sheer amount of games over the years, the story and lore of the series is a lot to take in for any newcomer, with multiple storylines happening at the same time. With this game though, the devs decided to strip it back with an entirely new story and characters, whilst also taking place in the same universe with little easter eggs and nods to the main story hidden throughout the game. In this game you play as Ethan Winters, whose wife went missing 3 years ago, when he receives a mysterious email from her with the address of an abandoned mansion in the middle of a Louisiana swamp. Ethan then decides to get his "Where's My Wife" outfit on and head out to the house. After entering the house and finding a creepy videotape, he then finds his way into the basement. Ethan finally finds his wife Mia alive, but something is definitely up. I mean, she's calling another man daddy, which I know Ethan's probably fuming about.
Daddy's coming. We need to go.
Daddy?
We need to go now!
I'm gonna fucking smash the fucking house up! I'm gonna fucking...
After looking for a way out, Mia disappears, only to reappear by jumping out at Ethan and now trying to attack him. Mia now keeps switching between her normal self and this possessed version, or maybe Ethan just married a nutcase. Because, to be honest, he doesn't seem too bothered about the whole situation. The character of Ethan is kinda funny. After you fight Mia and seem to, kill her, he's not even upset in the slightest. He just walks off and answers the phone. Then a couple moments later, she jumps back out and saws Ethan's arm off. But again, Ethan's fine with all this. He picks his dismembered hand up and keeps it moving, makes his way up to the attic, finds a gun, and then lets out a one-liner like he's fucking Duke Nukem.
Okay, fine.
See you in hell.
Honestly, I don't think Ethan came to rescue his wife at all. I think he came to finish the job. After Ethan takes down Mia, you get caught by Jack Baker, the owner of the house, and this is where you meet the family, with this weird family dinner scene straight out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It sets them up pretty well, as these are the 3 antagonists you'll be taking on throughout the game, all with their own distinct personalities, but all of them are absolutely batshit. First up is Jack, the dad. He's quite calm, but that adds to the creepiness of his character, as he can snap almost out of nowhere, like he does in this scene by chopping off his son's hand, which his son reacts like Butters from South Park when this happens. Then there's the mom, Marguerite. She's way more erratic and probably the creepiest out of them all. Her design and psychotic behaviour is just terrifying. Then there's Lucas, the son, who I'll be honest, he's a bit forgetful. He's not really all that intimidating and he's just a bit of a dick. He's not like the other two. He doesn't chase you around the house, he just sets traps for you and makes you complete challenges and puzzles for his own amusement. A bit like something out of Saw. Then there's the grandma, who honestly just sits there and isn't important to the story whatsoever. She will scare the fucking life out of you by just fucking appearing randomly. Throughout the game you'll be guided by the daughter of the family, Zoe, who will guide you through the house and help you find a cure for Mia to escape. I'm not going to tell the whole story here, just give you the basic setup, but I really like the approach they took with this game. It reminds me a lot of the original, because this isn't a massive event where a whole city or the whole world has been affected by this game's plot. It's just all happening in this one house, whilst the rest of the world is presumably carrying on, while Ethan goes through hell inside this place, and I think that makes it all the more creepy. And I love the aesthetic of the whole thing, with the whole found footage style. It gives the game a more realistic and down to earth feel that the series never really had before. And for me this makes it one of the most unique games in the series. There's nothing else like it. Even its sequel went a bit more far-fetched with its setting, but this truly felt like some creepy found footage horror movie, and that's why Resident Evil 7 will always stick out to me. When it comes to the gameplay, the one thing I'll say is the developers absolutely nailed the feel of this game. It feels like a Resident Evil game, but just in first person. From the slow movement and aiming, it doesn't feel jarring, it just feels natural. Ethan isn't a super soldier like Leon or Chris, he's just a normal guy, which obviously adds to the tension when taking on the enemies. One of the new mechanics in this game is a block button, which if you press right before you get hit by an enemy, stops you from taking as much damage. In terms of weapons, there aren't a lot, but I don't see that as a bad thing. It makes sense for a game like this to have limited weapons, with each one feeling important. You'll mainly be switching between a pistol and shotgun, as well as a few unique weapons throughout. The game also has the classic inventory system from classic Resi games. Here though you don't get to pause the game, which I kinda like. It gives the game a bit more tension, so make sure you've sorted out your ammo and first aid before you enter a new area. Honestly, Resident Evil 7 just feels like a good Resident Evil game, just in a different perspective. The way you move and aim feels like its very own version of tank controls, but in a good way. You definitely feel like a normal person exploring the house, rather than some jacked up soldier who can punch through boulders. I also need to mention the graphics and sound design. The game is almost 10 years old and still looks insane. It was the first game released in the brand new RE engine, the same engine used for all modern Resi games. Its photorealistic look definitely adds to the creepiness of exploring the baker's house, as does the ambient sounds. As you explore you'll constantly hear floorboards creaking and doors slamming, constantly keeping you on your toes, dreading what's coming around the corner, or even worse, what's behind you. So thanks to the new RE engine and great gameplay, Resident Evil 7 is easily one of the best games in the series. Not only does it feel great to play, it also looks and sounds great too. So this is the halfway point of the video. Thank you so much for watching today. Please consider subscribing, liking the video and commenting down below. I'm so close to 1,000 subscribers, so if you could help me reach that milestone, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm sure you'll enjoy the videos I have coming in the future, but also some in the past as well, if you want to check out those as well, all in my channel. And yeah, not much else to say. I'm going to stop talking now and let you get back to the video. So please subscribe. There's so many positives to talk about in this game. I've already mentioned the scaled down to earth story and the great gameplay, but that's not it. One of the things I absolutely loved about this game is how again it feels like a Resident Evil game, but not just in terms of gameplay. You see, for the first hour or so the game feels like a generic 2010s survival horror. You've got to get from point A to point B whilst being chased by an enemy, following one direct path. I remember playing this part of the game for the first time and being so worried that this was going to be the whole game. Just one long scripted sequence where the game tells you exactly where to go and what to do. After you beat Jack in the garage though, you head to the main hall of the house, and after a phone call from Zoe you find out you need 3 dog heads to open the front door, and the game just lets you explore. No hand holding, just a simple objective of go and find the dog heads. This is what makes Resident Evil games so great, is that sense of dread you get knowing you have to go deeper in the house to find a way out in these scenarios. You just want to get from point A to point B as quick as possible, but that's never an option. You're going to have to explore every inch of this house to find a way out, but it also pays off when exploring every area thoroughly, as there is items and collectibles hidden absolutely everywhere throughout the game's world. Even the ability to unlock new weapons way earlier and just being able to stack up on ammo and health items, so you're fully equipped on what's to come. You can find collectibles too that have some great perks. The bobbleheads unlock new defensive items, and the antique coins let you buy new weapons and stat boosters in the caravan. It's that good old risk and rewarding feeling that the old Resident Evil games have. You never want to stay in the same spot for too long, but if you don't, you might miss something. Like for example, when you head out the house for the first time, you're in this little hub world that links all the different chapters together. And I remember being really creeped out by all this, so I didn't stick around too much, which meant I never knew there was a secret item hiding in these bushes, because at first glance they just look like part of the world and not something you can actually explore. The amount of things you can totally miss by trying to get through areas as quickly as possible is insane, and this is what makes Resident Evil games so great. You don't want to stick around, but you know it's probably in your best interest to do so, to hopefully make the game a little easier in the long run. There's a few classic puzzles here as well, but they're very simple, and I reckon my 1-year-old could figure out how to do them. But they're still a nod to the series' legacy, so I do love seeing them included. One more good thing I wanted to talk about is the VHS tapes you find throughout the game. There's only a few, but they break up the game a little bit and give a bit more story to the family and the house, but also help you find secrets in different locations. In these sequences you play as Mia and Clancy, a cameraman whose team was murdered in the house prior to Ethan's arrival. As you see him try and escape this mad place, these videotapes added to the feel of the game perfectly, as you never knew what you were going to see next or what scenario you were going to be put in. The first time I played Mia's tape, I genuinely stopped playing because of the idea of running away from this woman and not having a flamethrower at hand genuinely terrifies me. Overall, the game is just a well put together horror game. Its general vibe and aesthetic have been built perfectly, and it also looked really good in terms of graphics. But also, the biggest thing I loved about this game was just how well they blended in the classic Resident Evil feel, whilst also making it feel like a completely new experience. Okay, so the bad. Well, there's not a lot, but there's still things I'm not too sure about. First up, the enemy selection. Whilst characters like Jack and Marguerite are certainly unique and terrifying in their own ways, most of the time you'll be taking on these boring bastards. They're called the Moulded, and even though there's some variants, some of them are genuinely terrifying, most of the time they just feel like a bit of a nuisance to get past and not really that scary. My main issue with this is that the game has a pretty unique setup when it comes to the main enemy bosses. They're all possessed in some way, making their actions more erratic but still human, which makes them all the more creepy, but Moulded are just big blobs that you just attack with no real character. I think it would have been so much cooler if we had got to see all the other people the family had captured as enemies in a similar possessed state, each part of the level having one or two of these characters roaming around, talking to themselves and being quite erratic, while you the player decide whether to engage in combat or reserve ammo and sneak past them. That would have made the game more terrifying, whilst also adding to the backstory of the Baker's house. Speaking of the Baker's house, another thing I'm slightly disappointed by is the location. The game has always felt quite small to me, so much so that even though I haven't played it fully in the last 5 years, I've still easily found my way around each level, but also there's not much variety. I mean, the game's set in a swamp, surely they could have used the backdrop a bit more. Imagine exploring the swamp in the dead of the night and how terrifying that would be. It's creepy in Red Dead 2, and that's not even a horror game. I don't hate the levels in this game, but I just wish they used the setting a bit more, considering in the last quarter of the game you just backtrack through the main house. But then again, it wouldn't be a Resi game without a little backtracking. Overall, I don't hate anything about this game, but I just think it lacked variety in certain areas, which would be fixed in the next game, for better and for worse, in my opinion. But saying all this though, these are just little nitpicks in an otherwise great game. I never really speak about DLC when I look back at a game, because most of them are quite forgetful, but Resident Evil 7 has probably one of the best and most varied DLC seasons I've ever seen. It does what all expansions and DLC should aim to do, take what the base game did well and give the players new experiences, and if possible, especially in a game like Resident Evil's case, add to the story. The DLC is split up into two different variations. First you have the banned footage collection. This came in 2 parts and in total offered a variation of 6 different modes, ranging from simple minigames to little story expansions. 3 of the modes were based entirely on combat and the basic gameplay, these being Nightmare, Ethan Must Die and Jack's Birthday. Each one has its own unique setting, but are all based on survival and scavenging ammo and supplies. The most unique one being Jack's Birthday, as it's quite a silly setup. You have to find food for Jack around the house to feed him whilst he sits there in a birthday hat surviving against a wave of enemies along the way. Honestly, it's such a bizarre setup for a game as dark as this, but that's why it's so memorable. The developers just had fun with the mechanics of the game and just made something different and fun. The other 3 modes include 21, a Saw-like take on the traditional card game. I mean, it's literally just a card game, but if you lose a round, you lose a finger. This one was way more fun in VR, from what I can remember. There's also Daughters, which is a prequel to the main story. You play as Zoe, the baker's daughter, the night the family turned into the monsters you meet in the main game. It's probably more scarier than the base game, as you watch the bakers go from a pretty normal family to what they turn into through the eyes of Zoe, and the whole thing is just creepy, as one minute they're normal and the next, well, they're this.
Zoe, come look. Come see her gift. Look at all the pretties my little girl is giving me!
The last mode in these packs was Bedroom, a puzzle-like minigame where you chain to a bed and have to escape. The only catch is every couple of minutes Marguerite will head back into the room, meaning you have to put everything back where you found it and lock yourself back in the bed and repeat the process until you can escape. It's so tense because you start second guessing yourself every time she enters the room, and this is probably my favourite out of all the minigames.
Oh, is it fucking hell?
The band footage collections were great, they gave you a bit of variety, but the team weren't done there as we've got 2 story expansions, the first being The End of Zoe. You play as Jack's brother Joe after the events of the main game. I'm not going to spoil too much of the story, but in the expansion you fight your way back to the main house to confront Jack. The whole time Joe uses his bare hands to kill the Moulded. Let's just be thankful this guy wasn't an enemy in the main game, because he would have been a fucking nightmare. The expansion also uses the game's location well. Like I said was missing from the main game, you explore the swamp, even take on an alligator, and all in all it's a pretty creepy vibe, even playing as Kratos from God of War apparently. Again, just like the band footage, it does a great job of giving players something different, whilst using the same setup and gameplay. The last DLC was actually free for everyone, that being Not a Hero. You play as a series legend Chris Redfield, tasked with hunting down Lucas at the end of the game. This expansion is way more action orientated, as you'll be taking on a lot of different variations of the Moulded, and it feels like a later game in the series, like RE5 or 6, which is okay because it's just an expansion. And it helps having this variety. It's a fun expansion, as most of them are, and again, this one was absolutely free, which to be honest, nowadays, when the game's on sale, you can get the whole package for less than one of the expansions, so you definitely get value for money with all the DLC. If you've never tried the game's expansions before, then you're missing out. There's so much depth here, and it's probably one of the best DLC seasons I've ever seen. One thing I need to mention, as I almost forgot to talk about it, is VR mode, exclusive to PSVR. The whole game was playable in the headset, and some of the DLC, but for some reason some of it wasn't playable in VR. But VR added a whole nother level of horror to playing through this game, as you can imagine, and it is such a great way to experience the world of Resident Evil 7. After the release of RE7, we'd see the series find its feet again, with every new release being praised and enjoyed by fans of the series. You can split the releases into 2 parts. On one hand you have the sequels to RE7, and then the remakes. Remakes of RE2, 3 and 4 have set a new standard on what a remake should be, taking a classic beloved game, updating its graphics and gameplay whilst also managing to keep the feel and atmosphere from the original, which these games have done perfectly, especially Resident Evil 2, and even though 3 is the one that most people seem to dislike the most, I actually quite enjoyed it. Then 4 is a game that in terms of gameplay didn't really need remastering. The original is still really fun to play, but the remake just looks so good in comparison. In 2021 we got the sequel to 7 with Resident Evil Village. You see, they hid the number in the game title again. I see what you did there, Capcom. I'll be honest, I'm not as much of a fan of this game as I was of 7. The whole setting just doesn't feel as good as that game. The whole vibe of 7 was gritty and dark, but also felt realistic with its characters and setting, whereas Village feels a bit more fantasy, you know, with the talking dolls, the witch girls, and oh yeah, the fucking 8-foot vampire woman. Don't get me wrong, it's still a great game, but I just didn't enjoy the setting as much. But in terms of its gameplay and mechanics, it offered a whole lot more than 7. So after the great remakes and impressive sequels, what's next for the series? Well, as you're watching this, Resident Evil Requiem is about to release, and only time will tell if it'll hold up to the standard of the games that came before it. From what we've seen, I have no reason to believe it's going to disappoint, but with the Resident Evil series, we'll truly never know until we finally get to play it. I just realised they forgot to hide the Roman numeral for 9 in the title. Oh, there we go, never mind.
He's done it again!
That is a foul!
You fucking little bastard!
He does it all the time.
He's done it again! You dirty bastard! You've done it again!
As for what happens beyond RE9, people are begging to see a Zero or Code Veronica remake, but me personally, I love them to remake the original, but in the first person style of games. Imagine how terrifying the Spencer Mansion would be in a first person view. That scene with the dogs jumping through the window, and just every encounter overall would be nightmare fuel, but that's just what I would want to see. Or maybe, I don't know, Capcom, show the Dino Crisis series some love. We haven't heard anything about it for a few decades, and it hasn't even been re-released. Wait, Dino Crisis 1 and 2 are on Steam? In this economy? They better be cooking those remakes up. It's It's been almost 10 years since the release of Resident Evil 7, and it's crazy how its impact has probably given us the best 10 years of the series since its first decade of its release. The reason being, the dev team decided to take a risk. Sure, they could have just played it safe with RE7, could have just been a continuation of the main storylines being told in the series, with the same gameplay as RE6, and just hope for good sales based on the fact it's a Resident Evil game. But they didn't. They completely changed the foundations and took a big risk, and it certainly paid off. They went back to basics and brought back the feeling we got when we played the original for the first time, and it's a shame other game franchises don't do the same instead of playing it safe year after year. I still remember the day I bought this game for the first time. I got it second hand from a store, and the person behind the counter told me their friend had traded it in because of how scary it was. This gave the game this almost mythical feeling, like I'm about to watch some horrific found footage film that's going to scar me for life. And honestly, I hadn't heard a game be described like that since, well, the original. And that's what Resident Evil needs to be. Not some souped up action fest. No, it has to be the scariest game on the shelf. And the one you don't want to play through, but also the game you have to play through. And that's exactly what Resident Evil 7 was, and ultimately the reason why it is the game that saved the series. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. That's it from me today, and as always, I'll see you when I see you.